listening to the Betmaker Show. This is the NFL Week 7 preview for Monday, October 14th, 2019. And now, live from Las Vegas, the host of the Betmaker Show, Brian Blessing.
One of our favorite segments of the week, one that we actually refer back to and relish the information when we get to speak with Jack from Bookmaker, the head odds maker on the NFL, looking ahead to week 7 of the NFL. It's a crazy time of year. These games are flying by. Other sports are starting to pop up, but we've got the NFL focus of attention here with Jack. And Jack, there's so many things going on. We dive right in. Brian Blessing in Las Vegas. I'm so anxious to get started. Didn't even say who the hell I am. Hi, everybody. Let's go, Jack, because we got games featuring a lot of injuries. Now we're into that mode with teams coming off buys and some really good teams on some really bad skids. This playing field has changed.
It's changed a lot, Brian, from the beginning of the season till now. Projections, even just the last couple of weeks. You take Kansas City, looked unbeatable a couple of weeks ago, to now they're vulnerable.
And their opponent all of a sudden has shown up with a defense, and it's not pretty, but still you're going into altitude in Denver, and we know Kansas City's this high-flying team, but Mahomes is kind of running around on one foot. We're seeing 3.5 on the Chiefs, and the total on the game from 49 to 50 will kind of go that route. But Mahomes starts out good, but as the game goes on, Jack, he's got an ankle that's just giving him all kinds of problems. The good news for the Chiefs is they have a bye next week, but that doesn't help him on a short week this week.
No, and it's as you said, it's going to be a short week. He has a bad ankle. He's trying to tough it out, get through to the bye week, and I think it'll be a factor. I think if it weren't for that, this game would have been perhaps 5.5.
Well, the one thing that was pretty obvious, and not that they don't have a boatload of talent, but Tyreek Hill's return makes them even more dangerous in terms of how they can stretch the field. But, Jack, let's just cut to the chase. This is all well and good now, and it's exciting, and the fantasy players love it, and the fans get all whipped up with exciting plays, and, yeah, they're a public team. Today it's fine. Talk to me when we get to January. The Chiefs' running game is not great, and if you can't run the football in January, you got a problem.
Well, it seems to I think this has plagued Andy Reid before. With Philadelphia, it started out with a somewhat balanced offense, and it became predominantly pass. And he had Donovan McNabb there, and he has probably the best, obviously the best quarterback in football right now, Mahomes. So I think he tends to lean that way and neglect the other part. And there are also injuries. They've lost some linemen, both offensively and defensively, and they got many, many problems on defense.
And you talk about a physical toll that's been exacted on these guys. Now, I would think you get to the middle stages here. This is no walkover, as I think. I'm glad you alluded to that. You know, pre-injuries and what we just last witnessed, this was a number was probably in the 5.5 range. But all the talk is about Kansas City. What about Denver, Jack? I mean, their defense is playing really well. Flacco's protecting the football. They're not going to wow anybody, but Denver is a big home field advantage. What's that worth?
Well, I think we're seeing it there. I think, as I said, this would have been 5. I think this would have been 5.5 or 6, and I'm giving them perhaps 3 points for home field. If they met in Kansas City, Kansas City would easily be a double-digit favorite if healthy.
Okay, and now we get to Sunday, and who would have thought this? Go back 7 weeks. One of the more intriguing games this week, and from a numbers perspective, is Arizona and the Giants. 2.5 or 3 is kind of what we're seeing out there. You guys are still taking a wait-and-see opinion here. The total on the game is 49, but it features Murray and it features Daniel Jones. So you got the 2 young kids that have arrived on the scene and done really good work for their teams. In fact, Jones has completely turned around the fortunes for the Giants. Arizona gets a win over an Atlanta defense that is just brutal, but they get the missed extra point to help them win that game. So there's some good things going on there. But the Giants, the big news, Jack Jones has done all this stuff without Saquon Barkley, and there's a real chance he comes back, and what a difference maker he's going to be.
It should be a big difference. He went down in the Tampa Bay game, and it's hurt them since then. And they had a tough – Thursday night was a tough game for them with New England. The weather, the injuries, all that. so we can sort of throw that one out. But they haven't really set the board on fire. They haven't set the world on fire in the last 2 games. Total offense, 213 yards against New England, 211 against Minnesota. They had a big game against Washington, but a lot of people do.
You know, a point and a half is a lot more than that when you're talking about going through a key number. And the first blush numbers we're seeing are 2.5 or 3. Is Barkley big enough that, let me just throw this out. If I said to you that by week's end, Barkley is definitely playing and all indications are in practice, he looks to be fully healed, is the number 3 or could it conceivably be 3.5?
I think it would be 2.5. I think they're anticipating the return of Barkley, but you also need to get the compliment. You need to get Shepard back from the concussion. If Barkley isn't ready to go, you need Gallman to come back, as you indicated, as a running back, as his number 1 backup, and their tight end. When they played last Thursday, I think the data on the TV was that they had produced 61% of the offense of those 3 or 4 guys. And they were lacking. They were missing last game, and they easily could have covered.
All right. That's going to be one to watch for sure. Now, a game to watch is Houston and Indianapolis, and this is a monster game where Indy's a 1-point favorite. Total on the game, 48.5, the consensus numbers that we're seeing on the market. I would say this to Jay, it's a big game, but I would think this is a playoff game for Indy. Everybody's in love with Indy. Punched KC in the mouth, got the win, freshened up for this game. But if they lose, this is a game for first place in the AFC South. In fact, if Indy were to win the game, they'd have the same record, but Indy would have the tiebreaker. But if Houston were to win this game, Jack, the swing is massive because Houston would end up having a 3-game lead in the division. They'd be up 2 games and the tiebreaker. This is a playoff game for Indy. I really believe that.
And I think the crowd and the team will treat it that way. The question is, though, Houston is playing very well. I mean, they gave up a lot of points the week before to Atlanta, but Atlanta's offense is not the problem. Atlanta defense is. So there's no shame in that. They did a great job yesterday. They held Kansas City offense, even though Mahomes was limping around, they held them to 309 yards. I mean, that's far below the Kansas City's normal output.
Does it fall through the cracks? I think maybe we're all guilty of this, that last year, Houston had a 9-game winning streak. And when Wolf Fuller was healthy, that was kind of like a video game offense because everybody's so worried about Hopkins. Well, Fuller's come back and he's healthy and he's a ridiculous threat. And Watson's having, Mahomes gets all the hype. Watson's having an incredible season. This Houston team's the real deal. I don't think they get any credit.
Well, normally one of the things I look at is on their net yards per attempt. They average 7 yards net per attempt, and their opponent only 6.4. When they run the ball, they average 5 yards an attempt. Their opponent 4.4. So they're winning on both sides of the line.
Then we go to Miami and Buffalo, and the Bills are coming off a bye. The number 16.5. If memory serves, Miami was 17, but that was down there, correct? And then the total on the game is 39. Honestly, they went back to Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Miami rallied against the Redskins. So that bears watching if it's Fitzpatrick who would actually be going against one of his many old teams. But this Bills team, the schedule coming up for them, this is where they have to make hay. They got a homestand off a bye. They get Singletary back. But the real story here is this defense is a monster, but it's an opportunity for the offense to find some rhythm. I think Miami's really walking into a buzzsaw here.
I think so, too. The Bills are coming off the bye week. They have a much better defense. They have a better offense. And Fitzpatrick did come off the bench, did rally Miami. He's done that a million times in his career, been handed their starting reins. And as he did in the beginning of the season, he just blows it. So he did a good job yesterday, but I think it's going to be a tough week for him.
Then we go to Minnesota and Detroit, and pending the Monday night result, it's a short week for Detroit. And obviously, I guess in that division, you say, oh, boy, you play the Packers. Oh, it's a letdown spot the next week. Well, there's no letdown spots in this division. Minnesota starting to get their act together, Jack, but man, Diggs and Thielen, and they've got the running game. If Cousins protects the football, this is a very good football team.
Yeah, if he continues his production, they're a contender. I wouldn't put them in the top 2 or 3, but they're right there. They're playing well. They played a great game yesterday, and as you said, they did it on every way possible. They got Stephon Diggs involved in it right away. I think he had 3 touchdowns. They ran the ball very well, and the defense against a potent Philadelphia offense was good. So Zimmerman's got them going in the right direction in every way possible right now.
I mean, it's a mixed bag. Some places we're seeing Minnesota 1, we're seeing picks. Some places we're seeing Detroit 1. The total on the game is 44. Especially when you're near that pick 1 range, it can be really volatile. And in this era where we see the numbers really react to the last game played, just out of curiosity, I'll give you 2 scenarios here. Well, not so much you're thinking, but what do you think the market will do? First one, Green Bay beats Detroit by 24. I mean, Green Bay rolls Detroit tonight. What happens to this number tomorrow?
Well, first, starting from the base, it'd be Minnesota's probably a 1.5 favorite. Detroit plays very, very well. It probably goes down to pick. Detroit plays terribly. It probably goes to 3, but I think both moves are wrong because if Detroit plays very well tonight, there's then they have the chance, as you said, not for the normal letdown, but just to have an extra day's letdown, which I think would favor the Vikings. And if they get killed, I mean, they're going to be hungry to come back and win this game. So I think the move will be wrong, but the reaction of the public has to be that way.
Is the bigger move the scenario where the Lions walk in here, play really well and win the game, or even if they go in there and win impressively, it's more likely if the number was going to steam one way, it would steam Detroit's way. Is that fair because they're home?
Well, you're going to have to look at how they win. In other words, if they win and the yardage is even and there's a few key turnovers that are returned for touchdowns, it may be a blowout on the board, but it's not really a blowout. It was a tough game. So you're going to have to look at it that way. Meanwhile, if they dominate, roll up the yardage, get the turnovers, and actually dominate the game, then you have to react in another way.
For outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today simply by going to the website at betmaker.com. All right, then we have Oakland at Green Bay. We're seeing 6.5 sevens, total 46.5. What are you at now, Jack? What's your suggested opener?
Green Bay, we opened 7.5. It got bet down to 7. And then we'll have it up after the game tonight.
And Oakland comes off a bye. A lot of things kind of point Oakland's way, right? I mean, the short week for Green Bay. Oakland coming off a bye. They remain road warriors. It's ridiculous. It's been forever since they've been home. But at the end of the day, Jack, from a current form perspective, you can't sneeze at these wins where they beat Indianapolis and Chicago. That's actually pretty impressive for the Raiders.
Oh, that's very impressive. There's no doubt about it. Going into Chicago and getting that win, even though Trubisky got hurt early in the game, they played well. I look for Oakland coming off the bye. I think it's an advantage, but Green Bay has more overall talent. I think 7 would be a fair number, as long as there's no big injuries or terrible. They don't look terrible tonight.
All right, what are your thoughts on Jacksonville at Cincinnati? Tell us what the talk was here in terms of hanging the number. Seems like it's locked down pretty good everywhere.
We opened Jacksonville 4.5. Currently, we're at 3.5. Tough game. Cincinnati played all right yesterday. Statistically, they weren't there, but they backdoored it. They got an early kickoff return. If you look at the numbers, Baltimore dominated the game. Look at the result, you cash your ticket on Cincinnati. Jacksonville had a very tough go against New Orleans, whose defense is underrated. They held the young Jacksonville quarterback in the pocket the whole game. Every time he tried to move, there was somebody there. He couldn't run. I still think Jacksonville is like a tier above Cincinnati. And I think 3.5 is a decent number that should hold.
I think you got the right number. Honestly, right now, I'd say, hey, you're on an island. You're at 3.5. The world seems to be on Jacksonville -3, but everybody's -3, -20, which means it's going to go to 3.5, and you've been there. So I think you're spot on with the number.
I think it's a good number, and as I said, I think it'll hold.
The Rams in Atlanta, and Rams on the road, trying to get both ends of their game fixed here, and the Falcons just can't get out of their own way. 53.5, 54. This should be a track meet. I don't know if Matt Ryan can survive the Rams pass rush. Aaron Donald's been just a monster. But what's going on with the Rams, Jack?
I don't know. I'll tell you the truth. It's a good question. If you look at what they did yesterday, I mean, they had 157 yards on offense. They started out the year, they were fine. It looked like they had 349, which is about average. They had 380, 344. They had the big game against Tampa Bay, but they were killed. They were beaten 55-40. They put up 518 yards. Came back with 477 against Seattle, but still lost. Their problems are on defense. And naturally, they have to get the offense working a little better. San Francisco defense is underrated. I mean, they did a top-notch job yesterday. They've done a top-notch job most of the season. And San Francisco, there was good money for San Francisco yesterday at +3. So San Francisco is a team to look at as a contender also. And right now, I think they're above the Rams after yesterday's victory. It's a tough game for the day. Rams should be able to move the ball in Atlanta. Everybody can move the ball in Atlanta. The question is, will they be able to control Ryan and his potent offense? And I don't think they're going to be able to. I think it's going to be a hard game all the way.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I would say, too, San Francisco punched them in the mouth. I mean, they beat them up. And the Todd Gurley question mark, I mean, he wasn't 100% to begin with. Now he's even nicked up further. The rookie running back, Henderson, looked like he's okay. But I don't know, man. Goff doesn't look right. Their running game doesn't look right. You think this was a team was a sure shot contender, one of the true favorites. Are the chinks in the armor so significant, or do you think McVay they right the ship with these guys?
Well, I'm going to give the offense a break with yesterday's game because, as you said, San Francisco is very, very good on defense. And if you look at the rest of their games, they're putting up above average numbers on offense. Their point total, they've had a few games that were clinkers, but I'm not ready to write them off yet. If they can't move the ball in Atlanta, then we'll start writing them off.
I would think this was a challenging number. San Francisco at Washington. Let me just throw it your way. What was the discussion in terms of what you wanted to hang here out of the gate?
Well, you had Washington early on yesterday looked improved. They were playing Miami, so that's really an overstatement. But then they choked at the end, let Fitzpatrick come in, drive the Dolphins down the field a couple times, and it looked like the normal Washington team. As we said, San Francisco is there. This game is 10. I think it closes higher. I think San Francisco goes 10.5 or up, and there's just a class differential here at almost every position.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, the one thing is it's a young team, and they're on this raucous roll. I was so impressed that they came off the bye. Who wants a bye when you're 3-0? And wow, I mean, they were hungry, and it didn't stop their momentum. And then they beat the Rams. But traveling cross country, right, Jack? I mean, never easy. The body clock for a West Coast team playing an early game against a foe you know you're better than. They still got to show up and go to work.
You do. If they show up and if they go to work, they'll get there.
The Chargers in Tennessee. Pittsburgh beat the Chargers up. Tennessee's offense was just how they can't get Derrick Henry going. But the big question here at the end of that game, it was Ryan Tannehill instead of Mariota. So I think that may be the case. Was there a gray area in terms of what you were thinking for this number?
Well, on Saturday when we posted it, we had Tennessee a 2.5-point favorite. After yesterday's performances, Tennessee just looked terrible on offense, just terrible. Not that the Chargers have been a barn burner any time this year, but I think they have a more potent offense, and I think their defense is not quite as good as theirs, but they don't close the gap all the way. So we opened the Chargers 1. Now we're back to Tennessee, a 1-point favorite on the bottom. The quarterback question is big. I don't think either Mariota or Tannehill are the answer.
And then a really intriguing game, Jack, late in the day. Baltimore and Seattle, two teams off to a really, really nice start. What was your thinking here? We know how big that home field advantage is, but that's as far as you can travel to play a football game in this league.
It's as far as you can go, and right now what we're saying basically is these two teams are even. We're giving Seattle the 4 points for their extra home field advantage, and it should be a tough game, but I think Baltimore's giving up a little too much yardage on defense, and Wilson this might be his best year ever so far, and he's had some good years. So I think Seattle can get the job done here. Wouldn't be surprised to see this number go a little higher.
Is Seattle one of those teams, Jack, maybe that's in terms of positive improvement from a power rating perspective? Has Seattle's power rating, I would think possibly Seattle, maybe Buffalo, are these the teams that maybe had to up their rating more than others?
I think those two. I think you have to raise New Orleans with Breeze going out. I mean, Breeze going out, and they're still sitting at, what are they, 5-1 or 4-1 after yesterday's victory? They've done it. I mean, controlling, as we talked about, Bridgewater in the last few weeks, they've opened them up just a little. When they get Breeze back, their defense, this is the best defense they've ever had, I mean, in recent memory. And I think those teams are the ones that have gone up. Though I think Dallas has slipped a notch. Philadelphia has slipped. But the ones we talked about, Minnesota, San Francisco, Seattle, and I wouldn't say Baltimore's sort of what I expected.
Well, then we get a game that's not for the faint of heart with two terrific defenses, New Orleans and Chicago. You alluded just seconds ago to the Saints and what they've been able to do in Drew Brees' absence, not just treading water, just going on a winning streak. What was the thought process making this number with a mad Bears team that got some rest for this game?
They did get some rest, and that's a bonus, and that's sort of why we opened the game 4, but it's drifting down to 3.5, 3- money. Because it's a matchup. It's Chase Daniels, the backup, against Teddy Bridgewater, the backup, and two defenses that are out of this world. Chicago's giving up the yardage, but their turnovers the turnovers they're getting are unbelievable. If we look at them in the last couple of weeks or the last few games they've played, I think the number is close to 9 in turnovers, and that's a lot to get in just the last 4 games. I mean, they've had turnovers of they had 5 against Washington, 2 against Minnesota, 2 against Oakland. That's 9 turnovers in 3 games. That's enough to keep you in contention with anybody.
All right, then we go to the Sunday night game, which is going to be a monster from a handle perspective. And I think, Jack, you might be able to just kick your feet back on the recliner and have a frosty beverage here. I don't know if this one's moving anywhere. Dallas 3 hosting Philadelphia. The total 48.5 in that neighborhood. Bottom line is, the loser of this game's got real problems. I mean, significant problems, because very quickly the NFC East is turning into the division winner may be the only rep in the postseason. I know there's a lot of football left to be played, but I think this game is that big.
Well, this is a 2-horse race in the NFC East. It's Philadelphia and Dallas. This being their first meeting, they're both 3-3. One of them takes the edge, and naturally, it looks like Dallas is the favorite to take the edge in that. But if Philly can pull the upset, then they'll get Dallas at home, and they'll become a huge favorite to win the division. And treading water at 3-3, and perhaps going 9-7 for the year, the loser has a good chance of not making the playoffs. Not just worrying about the division.
All right, my friend. Listen, you can laugh at me for a lot of reasons. Let me just throw this goofball thing out there. If Philly specifically, say Philly wins this game, well, I guess it really wouldn't matter, because the Giants will get their shot against Dallas at home. But Dallas beat the Giants with Manning, and the Giants are just 2-4, but they're a game behind. If the Giants were to get healthy, this division is everybody kind of going the wrong way. And if Barkley comes back and Jones has sparked some life into the Giants, I'm just throwing it out there. No one's like making me shoot fireworks into the sky. The Giants are actually breathing a little bit here.
You can throw it out there, Brian, but I'm not catching it. I mean, their defense is just too bad.
That's true.
They've given up 427. There's only one game this year, and that was against the Washington Redskins, where they gave up 176 yards that you could say is good. 355 is basically the league average. They've given up 494, 388, 499, 490, 427. You can't win.
All right. I threw it. It ended up being a pick 6. All right. Then finally, Monday Night Football, New England at the Jets. What were you thinking here, side and total?
The thinking was, how do we rate the Jet team with Darnold at quarterback? He played the first game of the year against Buffalo. They lost a very tough game. Their defense is playing great under Williams getting the turnovers. They knock off Dallas yesterday. So they're 1-1 with him at quarterback. Buffalo had a rally to win that game. As we remember, it was the opening game of the season. They easily could be 2-0. Now, New England is head and shoulders above them as a team. So Dallas was a 7-point favorite yesterday. Dallas had the problem of missing the both offensive tackles were hurt. Amari Cooper was hurt. They had some other injuries. Prescott took a lot of shots. It took a toll. But New England is going in here healthy. New England is 10. I think it goes down to 9.5 and dies there.
Listen, the Jets, I think, one of the things we saw that, albeit with the Redskins Miami game, and I think the Jets game, we saw that where you've got the lead and Darnold throws a goofy interception for no reason. They gave them a field goal at the end of the half. The Jets were running them right out of that stadium, but they let them hang around, and then they started playing the clock, and it turned it into a nail-biter. But the first 3 quarters of that game, the Jets were really impressive.
And I'll tell you the truth, the refereeing I thought was terrible. There were calls not favoring either team. It went for and against both teams. But it was the last one on the 2-point conversion looked like there had to be some sort of interference with them climbing all over it. But the one that set it up, where they called the pass interference, I don't know what they look at. And when they go to review on these pass interference things, it's a wasted timeout because they're just going to say we're sticking with the call.
If I'm not mistaken, that last drive, game on the line, there was a penalty on 6 consecutive plays, and then you alluded to the 2-point conversion. At some point, can you let the guys play football?
Right. It turns up now every time there's a good play or even just a play offensively or defensively, you got your head on a swivel looking for a flag somewhere. It's ludicrous. It makes the game really much more difficult to watch than it used to be.
And as always, we wrap it up. Jack, give us the report card. How was the entire weekend for you in week 6? What's the report card on your side of the counter?
Every weekend is all right when there's upsets, Brian. As you knock out a few teasers, you knock down a few public teams, and the weekend always ends up being good. If it goes the other way, then we cry like crazy.
Biggest result, the Jets?
The Jets, I'll tell you the truth, the Charger game was a good game. Okay. The Charger was very good. Dallas was Jet game was the best game of the day.
All right. As always, it's great information. We get the thoughts of Jack, the odds-making team at Bookmaker, what they're thinking out of the gate, where the number may go. It's racing by, Jack. As always, I know you're busy to start a brand new week. We always greatly appreciate your time and all the great information. Hope you have a good week, sir.
Enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Jack. Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at betmaker.com, and reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer, Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and or interpersonal relationships. At betmaker.com and the Betmaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling. An approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.